So what's up, everyone? Hey, it's Phil Gerbishak again coming to you today. Special treat, new friend of about 20 hours or so. Jeff Bajorek is with me today. Jeff wrote this book that, not kidding you, I moved this weekend. This book is so good. I dove in it. I didn't set it down, and my girlfriend kind of yelled at me and was like, really, dude? Like, you're going to sit here and read this book? I'm like, yeah. I'm going to sit here and read this book. It is about the forgotten fundamentals of prospecting and more. And Jeff, what's up, man? How are you?
So pumped to be here, Phil. Like, it's funny, 20 hours. I think that's about it. And I'm a guy, and I mentioned this in one of my emails, like I'm working really hard to not work on the weekends. Right. So then Dan Frost says, hey, Phil, you got to check out Jeff Bajorek's book. And shout out to Frosty. Appreciate the love. And then
what's
all
up,
of a sudden
Frosty?
we're emailing back and forth. And then I wake up this morning and Twitter says that I'm on at 3 p.m. on Facebook Live. And I'm like, rock on. I like the way this guy operates. So here I am.
Yeah, here you are. Here you are. Well, thanks for saying yes, and thanks for being here. I think it's interesting. You're a Gitomer certified advisor. My buddy Noah Ricken was a Gitomer certified advisor. Do you know Noah? Do you know the name?
I know of Noah because back in the day when he was running operations for Gitomer's Train One thing, he came out, he had a newsletter, and it was frickin' Ricken and the whole thing. So I have this uncanny talent for remembering lots of inconsequential information. The girl that I dated when I was in the 8th grade, I can still tell you her mom's phone number, even though I don't think her mom lives there anymore. It just like there's just a fountain of useless information I am sometimes. But so I remember frickin' Ricken, because how do you forget frickin' Ricken, right? So yeah, I didn't know you two were buddies, but yeah, I know of Noah.
That's awesome. Yeah, Noah and I go way back. Noah had transitioned his brand a couple times. He's at ETE in Milwaukee, actually. Okay. So Noah's a good buddy of mine. I've known Noah 9 or 10 years now. My best friend's daughter works for Noah. She's his right-hand man.
Oh, cool.
I hired her 8 years ago when I worked with Noah, because I worked with Noah.
I
helped him rebuild the sales team like they rebuild transmissions. So they've got an awesome team there at ETE. So shout out to ETE Reman and the Captain Reman team now.
Love it. You know what's interesting is in the digital world that we live in right now, we forget that there's more to sell than just software. Like there is literally a sales team out there in a company based around people who go out and rebuild transmissions. Because you know what? You don't just get to, I don't know. I turn in a car every 2 years, right? Like here, I'm done with this. Can you give me another one just like it for another couple of years? I forget that these things can be repurposed. People sell hard goods for a living. I live in Detroit, or in the Detroit area. We build things here, right? So it's always been a part of, the people that we are and the communities that we build here. But, coming into, where I'm coaching and training and consulting now, all this digital stuff and social selling, I sold door to door. It was in medical devices. That's door to door selling, right? You walk into offices. People don't take your calls, and no one's on social media, and so it was really a bit of culture shock to go to the world that you spend a lot of time in digital selling and in digital media. And that's how you interact with your people. I think we have a tendency as salespeople to forget that there's other people who sell stuff too, and not in the same way that we sell stuff.
Yeah, I think that's Jeff, because, we often forget those fundamentals, or if you will, sometimes those pre-fundamentals, right? Those things that we take for granted. I mean, things still get bought via mail order. I don't know. My grandmother used to buy Finger Hut. Remember, I think they're still around, right? Finger Hut, you know them?
No, I don't. I want to say that it sounds familiar, Phil, but I'm not sure.
No, they're terrible. So it's interesting. It's terrible how you have a good memory for useless stuff. Me too. My grandmother used to do that in the Blair catalog to buy polyester pants. Okay. So, but Finger Hut was mail order layaway stuff that you could back before you needed good credit, because my grandmother subsisted on about $600 a month fixed income. She could order stuff for just $3.28 a month. Over 78 months, she could buy herself a new cast iron skillet or something. That was Finger Hut, man.
Wow.
And think about it though, but it was call on the phone grandma would not call on the phone. She would write in with her check for her first 2 payments in the mail and send a check for $8 so she could get herself a new cast iron skillet.
Wow. But that was the way we did things. It was credit. I mean, layaway is credit in advance. Now there's credit being given away everywhere. So you just buy it and it's no payments, no interest till 2019. And so you get this new mattress or you get this new car or you buy the new roof for your house and, then you just kind of making payments on it forever. It used to be, I need a new roof in 10 years. Like think about that. The same models. I need a new roof 10 years from now. I better start paying for it now. That's layaway. And it's crazy, but I remember those. Well, you grew up. I mean, service merchandise. You remember service merchandise? It was this? You go shop. It was a catalog in person. You go shop, and then you'd start making payments on something, and eventually you'd get to go pick it up. It's just totally wild. Are we showing our age here, Phil? Is this boring?
I think the kids we are on fleek. So. I think you're kind of lit today. Is that the lighting that's lit or just the words?
I'm not sure. Probably the lighting. It's got to be the lighting.
Okay.
I don't know. Frosty a little bit. He would.
Yeah, he's just a kid. So maybe Frosty's watching now and he's thinking, "God, I can't believe I set you guys up." So
it's our job today to make sure we embarrass him, I think. But it was fun going back and forth with you because you said it was going to be epic, and I'm like, wait a second, epic? Would the kids call that lit? And then you came back with on fleek, and I've heard those things before, but I don't know. I'm just a salesman.
There's probably an emoji for that. Yeah, I'm just a salesman. so just a salesman, right? So you say that, but we all, I mean. At least I believe, and the people that I serve believe that sales really nothing happens until a sale is made, right?
Correct.
Nothing really worth doing. I mean, there's no operations team if there's no operations to sell.
Correct.
So Jeff, what was your first sales job? You said door to door, or was there something before that?
Well, it's technically door to door, but it was I wasn't going in a neighborhood. I guess I had a paper route when I was a kid, but my first professional sales job I was in medical devices, and I've got a degree in sports medicine. I worked in a hospital and physical therapy, athletic training department for 3.5 years, and then I decided I didn't want to do that anymore. And someone said, "You know what, Jeff? You should get into sales." And I said, "No. What's wrong with you? We've been working together for 3 years. You don't know me better than this by now." And she said, "I got you an interview. Dust off your resume. You got nothing better to do." And so I said, okay. And I gave it a shot. That was literally how I got through that interview process. The interesting thing is I gave 4 months notice at that job. So I literally couldn't get involved with an interview process. I was contracted to a high school and I had commitments to the athletes at that high school for some summer training and stuff like that. So I didn't want to go find a new job right away. I just had to give them notice that I wasn't coming back for the next year. So through the summer, I went through the interview process and I said, look, I can try this for a year. I'm really good at what I do. If it's terrible after a year, I'll go back to doing what I'm doing right now, but we'll give it a go. I'm 14 years later, here I am.
Wow. 14. Holy crap. Yeah. So somebody accidentally introduced you to sales.
Yes.
And now you're kicking butt and taking names, teaching people how to go. Because, like you said, get them certified. But Parabola Consulting, what the heck? Why Parabola, Jeff? Or parabola for those of us that cannot pronounce the word.
So it's interesting. I thought about this, today. That word is kind of the intersection of a lot of things for me. It's math, it's music, it's business, right? A parabola, if you think about it, is a graphical representation of exponential growth. That's what I do. I come in and I help people understand what they should be doing because I'm bringing attention to the things that they've forgotten about, the fundamentals that they've ignored. A lot of salespeople and sales teams miss the forest for the trees. I try to widen the scope and the perspective a little bit by asking questions that haven't been asked in a long time. So, when I think about that word, it was literally just a word that popped into my head when I was on a walk one night when I was thinking about what to name my company. And I thought about how some of my favorite bands and favorite artists would name songs in a way that would make you think about why they named the song that. And so I named my company a rather obscure word that you haven't heard since high school geometry. And then when you really think about it, you're like, oh, damn, that That makes a lot of sense. Okay, I like that. But then at the end of the day, most people can't spell or pronounce it. So my name's a whole lot easier to pronounce, although that's been hacked up a bunch of times too.
Come on, Jeff Bajorek is not easier than Parabola Consulting. Really?
Oh my God. It is. It is. You'd be surprised. More people have hacked up Parabola than have hacked up Bajorek. So that's just where I'm going. But you know, one of this is what I've learned too, is that a lot of times in selling, in business, in life, it's just so much more beneficial to be straightforward. My name's Jeff Bajorek. It's nice to meet you. That's all you need to know. You start going to, well, what's parabola? What's this, a parable? What is it? I'm trying to be clever, and it just comes off as being obtuse, right? So just it's my name. It comes up. I own my first page of Google results. We're good. It just makes it easier that way.
That's awesome. Well, Dan Gentry says he loves the math reference. You got one guy who likes parabola. So I don't know if that's enough for you to change it. But you do what you got to do.
Send me an email. I'll send you a copy of the book. I'll sign it to another math guy.
There you go. That's it. Yeah, Dan Gentry, did you hear that? Send him an email, buddy. So that's good. So Jeff, Bajorek, Gerbishak. Yes. I mean, it's like we're brothers from a lost clan of K-Bear or something here. What's going on with that? With Bajorek, I got to ask, man, what's the etymology of that? So because I'm Polish, that's Gerbishak goes all the way back 150 or 200 years, probably, except it was anglicized in 1900. So it was worse.
Got it. So it was not my grandparents. It was my grandparents' parents. So my great-grandparents came from Poland. So they're on my dad's side. So Bajorek is Polish. And it loosely translates to stick in the mud. So my personality clearly identifies with my namesake. And so it's funny. I was in high school. I was working at this movie theater, and there was another girl, my age, of course, who was working at this movie theater, and we went out a couple of times. And her parents were from Poland, and so she goes home and talks to her parents, and she's like, "Oh yeah, so I'm going out with this guy. Oh, what's his name?" And she says, "Jeff Bajorek," and they started laughing. They're like, "Oh, bet he's going to be a good time." Just the whole thing. And she could not understand why that they were laughing at her. And they're like, his name means stick in the mud, right? Like he's probably going to be a total dud. So we went out 3 times. She was a nice girl. We had fun, but we were 16, right? So it was, it was just funny.
You didn't marry her, Jeff?
I did not. No.
All right. That's fair. So we got one more person. Tamara McDuff says that though she and Matt don't get along, she still thinks it's a cool name. So that they got 2 for parabola there, bud.
Love it. Yeah. Love it.
Good. So it's good, man. I can buy that. I like parabola.
So that's the legal name of my business, but it's okay. There you go. I'll send you a copy too. All these math people. It's great.
Awesome. All 2 of them. That's great. Well, my brother's a math teacher too.
See, and so I can defend math to you, or at least to your brother. And the thing is that, and they don't explain this well. And actually, my stepson's going to be 22 coming up in a couple of months. And when he was in high school, he said to his math teacher, "I don't understand why I need to know this." And the math teacher looked back and said, "You really don't need to know this. And we just need to test you on it." And I think that's a terrible thing, because what math teaches you, especially at higher levels, when you get beyond the arithmetic, is how to solve problems, is how to make arguments, is how to prove theories. It's how, and it's a very analytical way to approach things. But I think there's a lot of analytical things that you need to approach in sales, right? Sales is very much an art form. It's also very much a science. And, it's one of the things I'm kind of doodling on, in my head, and I write every week. But the one of the things that I am thinking about for this week is that you have to dig into the gray areas. As if it were up to you, then everybody would buy your product every time. You'd have 100% close rate because you're totally sold on your product. So the black and white of it is what you have is different, and that's better, and that's amazing, and people should pay money for it. Yet people don't. So the gray area is in between, where there's a reason. There's got to be a reason why people aren't doing this, but I don't know what that reason is. And that is where the analytics come in a little bit. You got to think about, why would they buy? Why wouldn't they buy? What's going on right now? It's detective work. It's, throwing stuff against the wall sometimes to see what sticks, but then learning from what sticks and what doesn't. It's really diving deep and investigating, but then also doing such things in such a ways, or doing things in such a way that you're having fun, you're engaging, you're building relationships with people, people like what you have to say. People are beginning to trust you because of that. I mean, you can't just be binary and be really successful in selling, because you will turn off everybody who's not binary, and most people aren't. But there still has to be a binary focus to what it is you're trying to do, right? So you have to kind of be able to massage those things. And I've always been very analytical, hence the math stuff that I always liked. Although I haven't taken math since high school. I tested out of everything in college because I knew I didn't need it. But there's a lot of benefit to that. And so I'll defend math, and I'll defend its importance in sales, but then I can turn to page 2, and I'm going to try not to ramble too much, but I could turn to page 2 and say, if you reduce selling to just math, you're getting it wrong. It's not 100 calls yields 10 leads, yields 2 sales. That's boring. Not only is it boring, but it's imminently replaceable by technology that can do 1,000 instead of 100 in the same time that it takes you to do 100. So now you're essentially making yourself replaceable by reducing it to an algorithm. So there's so much going on, and this is why I'm such a fan of what I do. And this is why I get so fired up to talk to people like you, because I can ramble on and on about this. I'm watching you nod your head, and you're like, I know you're following me with this. And I mean, we could be here till 6 o'clock, Phil. I don't know if that's good for either you or me, but we got lots to talk about.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do. Well, Dan Gentry agrees with us 100%. So once again, coming back to the math, thank you, Dan. We appreciate that. But I think it's interesting. You do introduce some of the binary, but that art of sales, really, I think that's the important thing because, process does matter, but a lot of times you have to kind of choose your own adventure, right? You have to choose your own process. So let's start at kind of the beginning, maybe the pre-fundamental here, Jeff, because your book about 5 fundamentals, right? I like that. It's so fantastic. Like, it's just easy to get your head around having 5 fundamentals. So let's take it back though, even before that, maybe that's really where your book does start, is in the pre-fundamentals. I don't know. You call it fundamentals. Do you think it's fundamentals or pre? I don't know. It's your book. What do you think, Jeff? Uh-oh. Did we freeze? Jeff, are you still there, buddy?
For a second, Phil.
Uh-oh. Are you back?
All right, I'm back now. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
so
cool.
You said something about I lost you at the pre.
Yeah, so your book, would you call it fundamentals or pre-fundamentals?
The book is called The 5 Forgotten Fundamentals of Prospecting.
Yep.
So I call them the 5 forgotten fundamentals. I don't know that they're pre-fundamentals, but I mean, but we were talking before, it's like, you've got digital selling, which feels like an evolution of selling, or non-digital selling, analog selling, if you will. I think it's really the same thing. It's just through different channels. But if we talk about going back to basics, let's go before the basics. And that's what we were talking about kind of before the call, is I think, the fundamentals are always, they're almost remedial, right? I mean, that's ground level stuff. And that's what, and I think when people, to use the example of digital selling or social selling, which is a term it's a hashtag I haven't seen trend in quite some time. I talked to the people at the leading edge of social selling, and I pinged them on LinkedIn, and I a few of them, and you see the polls and things. How would you define social selling? You see all the responses, hundreds of responses, and the back and forth and everything, and everybody would define social selling in such a way. And then I'd look and I'm like, that's how I defined selling. That's how I defined selling before I got into the digital realm of things. So I think what we've got is a focus issue. People are focused too much on the tree, on the trees, and forgetting about the forest. And so the fundamentals are always baseline, and the fundamentals haven't changed. Whether you're digital, whether you're selling door to door, I was selling medical devices. So I started with knee braces and moved on to other therapeutic items. And then I started selling in operating rooms. And then I took a job with another company selling in operating rooms. And what it always came down to was ultimately what made us different, and why was that worth talking about? It wasn't that I sold this product line too. It was, why was this worth talking about? And when you can be aware of that, when you be mindful of that, and you realize that you have an advantage, not because you're being more focused, not because you're being better defined, but because you actually have a mastery of the whys behind the hows and the whats. And that, I think, is important. There are a lot of people selling mindlessly now. It's, here's the marketing message from my marketing department. These are the words I need to spit out verbatim. And if I spit them out verbatim 100 times a day, then 10 people will respond to them, and ultimately I'll make 2 sales. Well, why are you saying it that way? If you understand the why, then you can deliver that message more impactfully. You can deliver that message from this angle instead of from straight on. And it's just much better received from that point of view. And that's where the art comes in, right? It's not the words you say, it's how you say them. It's when you say them. And you can have fun with that. You tell me to make 100 calls so I can hopefully get 10 people to respond to me so I can hopefully make 2 sales. And I want to pound my head into a wall until I don't wake up. But you give me some latitude. Oh, well, that's where emotional intelligence comes in. And that's where your creativity comes in. And how are you memorable? Are you afraid to fail? Are you willing to go out and take some risks? I mean, the best thing in the world is when you take a risk, you go out there on a limb and it pays off. It's so much more fun than just the predictable grind, right? And, look, I live in Southeastern Michigan. We make things here. Assembly lines were built here, and a lot of them have been shut down. 100 calls a day to make 10 contacts, that's like pulling a lever on an assembly line. I'm not interested in that. Let's have some fun. If you can't have fun, then it's not worth doing.
Awesome. Well, let's have some fun then, Jeff. Let's talk about your 5 fundamentals, right? Because I think the first one is it's smart that this is first, and that is like, know what value you bring. So talk to us about what the heck that really means and how you've seen that show up for you or for some of your clients.
Well, it's something that for me in my business, I actually kind of took for granted when I first got started, because every sales job I ever had, someone had told me what we had. Hey, this is what we have and this is what we do. And so you take that message to market and you learn some things, you ask some questions, and you learn that maybe it's not exactly what your marketing department thought, but you can position it in a different way. But all that work is done for you. For me, being out and running a business, my own business as a trainer and a consultant, it's been different because I am the product. So it meant I had to create something. It meant I had to develop something, and you have to put a little more thought in it when you're creating something from the ground up. But understanding why you're different, why that's valuable, and what that means. Why does it even matter? So it's kind of a spin on the feature benefit outcome, except it's a little more personal, and it's from the standpoint of being different rather than being better. And that's one of the take homes that I really try to drive is, if you cannot differentiate, you cannot sell. I don't care if you're better. Don't tell me you're going to work harder. Don't tell me you care more about your customers or your clients. Don't tell me that, you're this superlative thing. All of that is subjective. And if it's subjective, that means it can't be proven. And if it can't be proven, then there's no real differentiator there. So when you speak in terms of why you're different, and when you speak in those terms in such a way that your prospect or the person you're trying to attract subjectively believes that you're better, then you've done your job. That's what selling is. But when you can objectively be better, now you have something to talk about. If it's all subjective, then it sets the stage for an argument. But if you talk about an objective difference, now you can have a conversation around something. And that is, I think, what a lot of people miss. They go through, it's the bull in the china shop. This is our message, and I'm going to beat this into your skull, and you're going to either agree with me or you're not going to buy from me, and I'm just going to move on. If you can have a conversation, you can learn something. And if you can learn something, maybe you can change someone's mind. But even if you can't change their mind, you're going to know how to reach other people. And so how can you learn more from your unsuccessful sales calls? That's why I think, and I also think too, there's a lot of people who are afraid to sell because they've been beaten over the head with why they should buy from somebody before. As a salesperson, you can't come and tell your customer why they should buy from you. You can only talk about why you're different and why that's worth something. If you take that approach, it changes the way people consider and feel about salespeople. And that gets more people to take the role of salespeople. And if you're an entrepreneur or a small business owner, or if you just have a side hustle and no, I've just got a great product, I don't need to sell. Well, we know that's BS. But when you can reframe and refocus what a salesperson actually does, I think that's going to make for better salespeople.
Yeah, well, and I think it also makes for a better customer experience, right? And for a prospect experience, because if we focus on just the differentiating things, which means we don't spend our time beating our chest, oh, I'm the best. Instead, we say, well, here's what's different about me, my product, my service. It's easier to see. And hopefully, if you can draw that out, it makes more clear also why you're a better fit for that customer than just, by the way, we have a product, because then you're going to have a race to the bottom, right? Then you're going to be searching for the lowest price, huh?
Mm-hmm. You know what's worse than winning the race to the bottom? It's finishing second.
What's that?
Finishing second. And along the way, all you've done is devalue yourself. All you've done by lowering your price. Great. So you're going to get beaten by a penny. And here's the thing too. You lose business the same way you win it. So as soon as you can no longer keep that razor thin margin, or when you win because you come in with the tightest margin so you can save someone a nickel on every product that they buy from you, they're going to come back when that contract is up and going to ask you for another nickel. And in the meantime, the cost of milk and gas and everything else has gone up. You don't have that nickel to give anymore. And so that race to the bottom never stops. That's the other thing. You never win it because it's never finished. You're only currently leading when they stop to take the stats, right? I'd rather not race. This is different. This is something that is legitimately different. And we're going to talk about it. And maybe it's not the right fit for you, but along the way, we're going to have a conversation about how that difference can be really beneficial for you. Now I'm seen as someone more than just a salesperson. I'm seen as a resource. I've seen someone who knows things that can help your business or can help your life in a B2C world that you didn't think about before. And you can't see it all. Like, you don't know everything that's out there. But when you know that you can come to me for real expertise and real knowledge, now I'm someone who's worth paying attention to. Maybe you can't buy from me right now because a different solution works, but you've got a friend, right? Or maybe you're just waiting till that cycles up, that product cycles up. So when you're ready to buy again, I'm the first person you call. That's okay. I don't need to make a sale today. I got a long time to make sales. I'd like to plant the seeds right now to make sales later.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. So give us an example of what you see as different, maybe between, consultants, or maybe talk to us about your difference, Jeff, because certainly, the fact you've written a book, that makes you different, right? The fact that you can say parabola, that's a special gift. Right? So what else you got, dude?
Well, it took me a while, and it took me really stopping and paying attention to realize some of those things that are different. Is like, I think a lot of salespeople, they get out there, they do their jobs, and everything that I do is just kind of intuitive to me. I don't try to do anything real funky. If it doesn't feel natural to me, I'm not comfortable doing it. And if I'm not comfortable, I'm not going to make any sales. So all the things that I was doing and that I do, they're intuitively, and they come intuitively and naturally to me. So I just assume that these are the things that everybody does. Well, I mean, you go and you look around and people are looking at you saying, wow, I've never heard it said like that before. If you start paying attention, if you're self-aware enough, you start to realize some of those things that you do differently. And, I had to ask 3 or 4 people before I put this out. And I said, okay, you read a lot. Anybody else saying this? Because this just came intuitive to me. And I think that this is different than anybody else is talking about out there. There are a lot of books being written about prospecting. I don't think any of them is written from this voice with this point of view about these topics. And it's tough to think that. And I think another thing that adds to it is there any such thing as new information out there anymore? I mean, these concepts have come up from time and time again, right? So I think the default is to say, oh, well, it's not mine, so I can't take credit for it. Well, maybe the concepts are around for a long time, but that means they're timeless. And if I'm speaking about them in my own voice, from my own point of view, then someone's going to hear it differently for the first time. And, I think as someone who's known for for the last 8 to 10 years, I've been able to recognize that I've been doing things differently than my counterparts and my colleagues, and that I've been successful doing things that way. Doesn't mean that all those people were unsuccessful, but when I noticed that I'm starting to do things differently and that I knew I could teach some of those things to other people, that's when I decided to start a business for myself. And so I think what I do differently than other people is going back and looking at the principles that underlie all the success. When you talk about the digital selling and using social media channels and everything, you're engaging through different channels the same way people have been engaging with their prospects for generations. But you've got the knowledge and the skill set and the routines and everything to be able to show people how to do that, right? Well, I'm going back in the other direction. And I'm going to say that these things, that Jeffrey Gitomer taught us, right? It's not about, people hate to be sold, but they love to buy. So let's flip the script on that a little bit, and it's not about inbound prospecting. It's not about outbound prospecting. It's about, look, if you don't know why you're different, then you got nothing to talk about, whether they came to you or came to them. So let's take a step back again. And I think salespeople, as much or more than anybody else out there, get in their own way. So how do we look to get out of our way? How do we step back and take a wider view with a wider lens? And, it's right there in front of us. A good coach gets the best out of their athletes, gets the best out of their clients. Listen, Tyronn Lue is not going to make LeBron James any better, but what Ty Lue is going to be able to do is allow LeBron James to do what he does best. And that's what I like to do with people. One of the first things I tell new clients is like, look, I may not teach you anything new. I'm going to teach you a different way to look at what you're already doing, but you've been selling for a long time. You've been successful. You know how to do this. Let's take a look and let's ask some of those, some of those questions that just haven't been asked in a long time.
Totally agree, man. Right on the money. So Dan Gentry says exactly, and Tamara reminds us, if you make the sale and price alone, you lose it the exact same way. Just reiterating Jeff's point there. So Jeff, obviously, we're not going to go through the whole book, but one of the ones that hit me really in the head here is about creating some tension.
Yeah,
creating some tension, and I think that's than what I've heard before. To your point, I think that is a differentiator for you. So talk to us about how we can create some tension, what that means, and how we do that, please.
So I think sales has gotten a bad rap for a long time of being the, if they like me, then they'll buy from me, or if they don't like me, then they won't buy from me. So if I just buy them a bunch of stuff and say a bunch of nice things and I'm, super agreeable with everything and I bend over backwards for them all the time, then people are just going to buy from me. And it's just not the case. I believe anymore. And what's interesting too is I came out of an industry where we weren't allowed to buy lunches. We weren't allowed to entertain in the way that other industries were allowed to. And medical device, right as I came on, it became very much controlled with government regulation and things like that, because there were a lot of companies spending a lot of money to influence purchasing decisions. And when those purchasing decisions involve Medicare money, the government tends to take an interest, right? So we had a lot of restrictions put on us. And so I couldn't just be overly nice to somebody. I couldn't just take someone on a weekend trip. I couldn't, I didn't even have that available to me. So I had to find a way that was going to make someone think. I had to find a way that was going to create some tension. And the tension is what came out of it. It's productive tension. We're not talking about offending people. I'm not talking about being off-putting. I'm not talking about being even inflammatory. But just like, look, I've got something here. You've never heard of it before. Or maybe you've heard of it before, but you just thought it was too expensive. Let me tell you why it's different. And that's where the differentiation point came from. Let me tell you why it's different. Let's have a conversation about that difference. When we have a conversation about that difference, you may tell me to go pound sand because that's not something you want. Or you may realize for the first time, because I presented it to you in a different way, that this is something you're going to want. Maybe even something that you need because the outcome is something you're searching for. And now the tension comes where you got to justify the price to whoever's paying the bill. Or you're paying the bill and you got to decide, oh my gosh, this is this really is something that's different and beneficial, but it does cost 20% more. Where do I find the money for that? Or, I mean, there's so many different ways you can create that tension, but tension is a stimulus. No one's going to move. And it's not necessarily from discomfort. And there are a lot of sales organizations, and it's so cliche now. It's you got to find the pain. You got to dig deep. I think nobody buys a Rolex because they're in pain. Maybe they're in some kind of emotional pain because their daddy didn't hug them enough. And so they need a Mercedes AMG to feel better about themselves. That's not the kind of pain that typically gets thought about, but people buy stuff because they want to buy stuff too. So what do? In terms of luxury brands, it's a status thing, but in a lot of ways, you want to be able to create a difference between where someone is right now and where they could be at another time. And when you can align that tension with what their ultimate desire is, which is where all the discovery questions and that process comes in, when you're properly aligned, there's always a little bit of tension. And tension is something, though, that people tend to shy away from because it's too close to conflict for people to be comfortable with. I'm not talking about creating conflict. I'm a lover, not a fighter, Phil. But I do want to create a situation where someone feels the need to at least consider a different alternative.
Awesome. A lover, not a fighter. That's different in a lot of salespeople. I mean, truly, right? You read the Challenger sale, Jeff. That's not what they're teaching, man. Challenger sale is all about get in your grill, right? Push them around.
I disagree.
Come on.
I'm pushing back on that.
Really?
I'm pushing back on that. So I didn't read Challenger for a long time because I knew what Challenger was about. And I'm like, no, I already sell that way. And then I finally listened to it because I listen to books more than I read them. And I was like, oh, you wrote my biography. That is the way I intuitively sold. And again, my book is not a Challenger knockoff, but there's certainly some influence there because it's intuitively how I sell. Look, I'm going to tell you about something you don't know about. Take it or leave it. That's fine. But I'm going to tell you something that I don't know about. And I'm going to create my line of questioning and I'm going to create my discussion points around this subject that I believe is valuable to you. And based on what you've told me all along, it's valuable to you. So let's talk about that thing. Maybe that thing is going to be a little uncomfortable. Okay, that's where the tension comes from. But I'm not here to offend. I'm just here to have a conversation that needs to be had. In the medical world, when I'm selling to physicians, it's about the patient on the operating room table or wherever. If I'm talking about, to a CEO, it's about the profits, it's about the employees, maybe it's about the shareholders, right? But this is the elephant in the room. We need to talk about that. And maybe that's a little tense. Now, I'm not going to get up in your grill and say, you need to do this because I think and Challenger is misleading because it suggests a confrontation. I think Challenger really refers to that tension where, look, I've got this data that's important. You should really take a look at it, even though it might sting a little bit to see what you're missing out on. Let's talk about that. And I think it's a different way to sell. And I think the Challenger methodology is abused the same way just about every other sales methodology is abused. That's why I don't subscribe to a particular sales methodology, right? I mean, those methodologies start very purposefully and very intentionally, and they're very, very good. And then someone takes them, and it's like the game of telephone when you're in preschool, right? The message starts down here, 8 people later, it's something totally different. Those methodologies are bastardized generation after generation after generation until you get someplace where it's like, wow, you're representing this brand. Have you ever read the book? Like, do you realize what you're doing is in direct confrontation with the way it was originated? And that's my problem with methodologies is everybody generates their own Cliff's Notes and then it's Cliff's Notes based on Cliff's Notes and Cliff's Notes. They're not a sponsor of the program, are they? Do I need to mention them or is it not
this month? No.
Okay. All right, good. So, that's the, that's my resistance to any particular methodology is it gets abused. But when you can take the spirit of where that stuff came from, and you can integrate that into your process and you integrate that into, and it's about personalizing that methodology for you. That's when it gets fun. And that's when you can really be effective. There's some stuff in Challenger that I didn't totally agree with, but in a lot of ways, it gave me language to describe what I knew I was doing, but didn't have the words to explain in the past. And I've taken stuff away from Sandler. I've taken stuff away from Challenger. I've taken stuff away from Miller Hyman. I work pretty closely with Jeffrey Gitomer. He wrote he was kind enough to give me a quote for the front page, for the front cover of the book. Everything that I try to, and this isn't, I'll take this in a different direction, Phil, and I'm curious to your thoughts on this. I will purposely seek out people I don't agree with to try to find why they do what they do, because there's some gem, there's some nugget in there. And it's not that I disagree with Gitomer or any of the people that I listed there, but I will listen to podcasts where there's a polarizing guest. Someone is polarizing for a reason, but people follow, but they have a following for a reason. It's like, it gets back to that gray area again. It's like, okay, maybe I don't agree, but I'm not the ultimate authority. Why does this person continue to do what they do? And maybe there's some perspective there that I can glean. I mean, where do you sit on that? I mean, I don't believe in echo chambers. I don't think they're good. Who do you, or how do you approach that stuff?
I totally agree with you, man. I go after that I can, and I can't single out one that I disagree with at all. But what I can say is I do try to learn from all angles. I mean, one of your points in the book is about being the expert. And for me, that means, I read books from B2C sales experts. I read books from B2B. I read some that are inside sales. I read SDRs. I read social selling. I'm trying to get all angles. So to that point, I think it's important to take in as much as you can, and then separate this and the things that work in your personality. Like for me, I'm a big relationship guy. I mean, relationships matter. That being said, my goal is not to be my prospect's friend, but to be my prospects or my customers' trusted advisor. Right. Yeah. That's the real goal for me, is I want them to trust me. Not because I say, hey, Jeff, you should trust me, right? The old used car salesman crap. Yeah. That's not it, right? That's not it. But what it does do is it says, my goal is to be trusted. And then I leave that decision up to my customer to make that decision. But yeah, I mean, I don't have to agree with someone to learn from them. There's a lot of people I don't, I guess I don't necessarily agree or even disagree. Just it doesn't always sit. But I still listen to it. I still pay attention to it. I mean, there's so many different point of view out there that it's like, okay, well, depending on the situation, like I'm not a fan of, I'll be the first to tell you, right? I don't like cold calling because I don't like to be cold called.
Right.
If I'm gonna pick up the phone and call someone, I want them to want to talk to me. I don't want to try to, kind of coerce them in the first 7 seconds. Now, that being said, you mentioned about medical devices and many of these kind of door-to-door type sales things, that is the only way to get in front of those people. So therefore, I think you should do it, right? I mean, sometimes some people, you should try everything possible. Direct mail, I don't like junk mail, but if you send some value my way, I'm going to open it, right? I don't like spam email, but I can tell you that if I get a book pitch or someone to be on my podcast that's good, I'm going to open the message. I always take a look, but if they're crap and it's not personalized and there's no value to me, then it's different. So I think, that's a long answer to your short question of taking in what's different. But, even, Challenger, I would not say I disagree with Challenger. I think it's important to have strong insight that you provide to offer something. But I think taken to an extreme, it's conflict for conflict's sake, and I don't agree with that at all. And I
agree with you there. I don't think it's I think it's about tension, but conflict is an extreme, right? And it's not very far from conflict to bullying, and I'm not interested in that. And that's what and that's the thing is I see Challenger and well. I'm not even going to continue to say it that way. I think Challenger describes very closely how I used to sell, and how I continue to sell. But I would not describe the way I sell as being bullying. And if anything, it's a velvet hammer, right? If it's a hammer, it's just a nice, soft little tap that you like to get like a massage, right? But But to think that it's that close to bullying, that means that people have taken way too far. And again, it's if a little bit is good, then a lot of it is really good, right? No, you got to understand the concepts behind it. You have to understand the principles and the fundamentals behind what it is that you're doing, and then use them the way that they need to be used, right? I play a lot of golf. You look at the guys on the PGA Tour, not one of them has a swing that looks exactly like the rest of them. But you know what? They all know what the club head is doing at impact, and that's really the only fundamental that works. There are different ways to be efficient in the backswing and then in the follow in the downswing in order to efficiently drive the necessary forces to the ball. But ultimately, the only thing that matters is that moment of impact, how fast the club head is moving and what direction is pointing in. And, if you just try to copy the best golf swings, you're not going to be as good. If you understand why you're doing what you're doing with the club head, with the ball, whatever that is. So, again, to think that Challenger is becoming a bullying mechanism when in fact I see it as being the anti-bullying mechanism, because you're just starting conversations that are worth having. I think that's what selling's about. But it's interesting when you think about cold calling, and I want to ask this back to you. I don't like cold calling either. I don't know very many people who do. It is a kind of and I'm not going to argue that it's necessary, because clearly you can run a business without doing so. But at some point, then how do you maintain control of your sales process? There's a lot to be said about creating an environment to buy. That is huge. But if you're not having conversations with people, if you're not starting a conversation with somebody, are we really arguing the temperature of the call? Or is it something about reaching out? Is cold calling, do you mean specifically the phone, or do you mean reaching out to people who you don't know to have a conversation that they didn't expect to have?
Boy, that's a good question. I think if I can add real insight to a conversation, if there's a connection I can make, I think it's, I think it's possible, but it's got to be a real connection, not a guest connection. Meaning, for instance, okay, Jeff, if I look at my profile, and part of my podcast host, right? So somebody coming to me and asking to be on my podcast is sensible. Someone coming at me and saying that, hey, by the way, I see, maybe you need podcast production. Okay, I see that. That's insightful. But what I guess doesn't make sense to me is someone identification more than a temperature, right? I'd like someone to try to make a real connection and listen to, for instance, again, if they're pitching podcasts, because I get this, 30 or 40 times a week about something. I'd like for you to have listened to anything besides one of the last 2 episodes. I'd like for you to actually pick one of your favorites. Like, tell me why you like it, not the pretend because you have a podcast, you need this. Like the whole, I can tell you last week I did training with a company that the VPs of sales tell me that they won't accept connections from people that they don't know, because the very next message after the connection is trying to sell them leads and prospecting and cold calling, right? And so, I don't think you can just start a conversation directly about business. I think you need to find something where we can have a real conversation that isn't relevant to business. You're from Detroit. Are you a Pistons fan? Do you like the Lions? Are you a fan of the Wolverines? Are you a Harbaugh fan? Do you like cars? I would try to find something in your profile that I could try to have a genuine connection with. Like, are you a Big Ten fan? Do you like college football?
In my former career as an athletic trainer, I worked football 6 days a week and really kind of got burned out on it. I appreciate it. I can watch it, but I don't spend every day, or, I don't spend every Sunday or every Saturday. I love college football season because golf courses are wide open after noon around here. So you get a nice sunny day. So golf is your connection. Golf. Yeah, that's my thing. Yeah.
Right. So if I were to say, hey, Jeff, I noticed that you wrote an article or you posted something comparing, Payne Stewart to Fuzzy Zeller to how to sell, right? I'm naming old guys, right? If you made that, if you wrote that article and I had a connection with that and I picked up the phone and called you and have just, hey, dude, that was an interesting article.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about your point of view. Like, why is that interesting? I think that's legit. I think the whole, hey, you want to buy a monkey? Hey, you want to buy a monkey? That call over and over again is a lot of times what these folks are doing, man. They're just jamming value props down people's throats in hopes of landing a fish.
I agree with you. There are fewer and fewer reasons to be able to justify such behavior anymore, because there's too many ways to connect and there's too many ways to learn. However, cold calling or any kind of outreach, any kind of first outreach, let's not call it cold calling, let's call it first outreach. That's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for everybody. People don't like to get it. People don't like to do it, but it has to be done. That's the thing, is we can call it whatever we want. We can say, well, it's not totally cold because I had something to talk about. Well, good. I'm glad that there was some kind of common ground that people could talk about, because that part cannot be avoided, because ultimately there has to be some tension and there has to be a stimulus. And that tension starts when you create it. But if you look, one of the first lines in that particular chapter is, there can be no tension without first being an implied, what is implied by tension is that there is a connection, right? And my partner on the Wine the Buy podcast, Christy Walters, she's brilliant. She's more than the better half of our podcast, right? And she said that. She's like, saying that there's tension implies that there's a connection, and you cannot do anything. You cannot make anything happen without that connection. And sometimes that connection is a friendship. Sometimes that connection is a good relationship that's fostered over time. Sometimes but let me go back on that though too. Just because you're friends with someone doesn't mean they're going to buy from you. Just because you're not friends with someone doesn't mean that they're not going to buy from you. And that was one of the things that I took away from Challenger again, was that relationships are important, but they're not the be all end all. And so again, what are we calling a cold call? Should we call it first outreach? Because when you say that you don't have to cold call and you mean it the way you mean it, which I totally agree with the way you mean it, someone else is going to take that ball, give them an inch, they'll take a mile, and they're going to say, I never have to pick up the phone again. And we know that's wrong. And we went from, we connected yesterday on LinkedIn because Dan Frost introduced us, and now all of a sudden we're doing this. I mean, this is great, but it was still a first outreach. I'm not selling you anything. You're not selling me anything. This is a meaningful connection. But at some point that bridge needs to be crossed. And I think people get the idea that when you say it shouldn't be freezing cold, or you shouldn't just pick up the phone or send an email out of, total left field. It leads them to believe that you don't need to send that first email, or you don't need to make that first call. And that's where I think so many salespeople get it wrong, because if you think about the fundamentals that we're all taught, you need to get in front of people who can buy from you, and you need to give them a valuable reason to listen.
Yeah, totally agree, man. Totally agree. So we're simpatico there. I think that's important. The connection part, I think, is the part that really resonates the most with me, is we have to find a connection. What the heck is it, right? So is it golf? Is it work? Is it position, right? I call it looking people in the eyes, right? We look for what's insightful, what's in common, or what's interesting, right? The three things. That's how you make a connection. Right. And people, for whatever reason, people that take the lazy way out make it bad for all of us. Yeah.
Oh, one bad apple. Yeah. One bad apple. That's all.
One bad salesperson.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So Jeff, we're almost at an hour here, man. So tell me, if someone were to get started prospecting, right? Because that's what the book is about, right? The fundamentals of prospecting. Hit us over the head, between the eyes, wherever you want to hit us, man, with how they need to get started. Just give us 1 or 2 tips about getting started prospecting so they can make more money in a few months after this seed cultivates.
So one of the things that I do in the book, and I think this is really valuable, this has come out of some other books that I've read recently, where they kind of encourage these exercises at the end of each chapter. So I wrote this book as kind of a workbook. There are thought exercises, there are questions you need to ask, you need to answer. And I think, this being a fundamental book, the questions that get answered are ultimately the thought processes that you need to go through in order to get started. So, why are you different? Why is that valuable? Why does that matter? Answer those questions. I think that's the first place to start, right? And then you go further and you ask, regarding your target audience, it's who are they? Why would they buy? Why wouldn't they buy? Right? How are you going to create tension? What are you going to be able to create for them that they can't experience now? Right? How are you understood as an expert? And I can go through. There's 15 or 16 questions that I have people answer, and you can download the book for free. And when you download the book, the PDF, 2 days later, you get an email from me with the workbook, so you can print these sheets out and you can write on them. And I suggest that you go through this thought process for every new account, for every product line that you're selling. You're not going to have to do it for long. What you're going to notice are some themes. And then as you pay attention to your sales processes and to your sales process and the calls that you're making, certain things become ingrained. And these exercises themselves create a self-awareness of what you're doing, what's working and what's not. And then you can go from there. So I'm hesitant, Phil, because that's not the way I sell, to say, just download the book and do the workbook. And then that's right where you need to start. But I really believe that what I've done is put together some exercises and some thoughtful questions that are going to make people sit and think. And so if I want to take it even further than that, the first thing that I recommend people do is stop and think about what they're doing, why they're doing it, and what they hope to change, what they hope the outcome is going to be. And once you have an idea of where you are and where you want to go, you can plot the steps and your route along the way. I think the slowing down and thinking is the most important part, and that's what's missed most often.
Wow. So slow down and think, folks. Get started with your prospecting by understanding who you are, the value you bring, and who you want to serve. Get started. Get a copy of Jeff's book. Seriously, 30-minute read to read this thing. Probably a week, though, to implement, because it's full of stuff. 15, 17 questions that are going to help you prospect better. So if you want to get in touch with Jeff, I encourage you, go over to his website. If you can spell Bajorek, and I'm going to put a link in here, Bajorek, if you're listening. I'll put links in the show notes and such. But check Jeff out, jeffbajorek.com. Get a copy of his book. Get to know Jeff. He's really smart. It's been now 21 hours that I've known him, and I feel a lot smarter for having known him. So thanks for being here, Jeff. You are a star, buddy.
Thank you for having me. You're a very what's the word I'm looking for here? You're a rock star, Phil. I mean, I've heard of you long before you heard of me, and it's actually I'm kind of kicking myself for not reaching out ahead of time. I really appreciate. You're a very gracious host. Thanks for having me. Thank you for letting me ramble on a little bit. I offered you a picture into my mind, which is sometimes a scary place, but a couple of good nuggets have come out every once in a while, and I think this book is one of them. And I'm looking forward to talking to more people about it. I'm proud of this work, and I'm glad to hear that other people are responding to it, because that's why I did it.
Absolutely, man. So again, if you want to get to know Jeff even more, check out jeffbajorek.com. It's on your screen. I'm going to put it in the notes, and you need to connect with Jeff. Thanks, buddy.
And one quick thing too. This is something I do that I'm finding a lot of people don't. Send me an email. Let's talk. Let's get on the phone. Shoot me an email, jb@jeffbajorek.com. It's just my initials. If you can't get that, if you can't remember that, I can't help you. But reach out to me. I do every couple of weeks. I've got an office hours program that I do where I just open up a Zoom room. Anybody that wants to pop in, let's talk. Let's talk about selling. Let's talk about golf. Let's talk about football. I don't care what it is, but me being a remote salesperson for as long as I've been, I never had a water cooler to talk around. And what I get inspired by is talking to other salespeople. And I love having conversations like this. So I try to create opportunities to have conversations like this. And there are not a lot of people who do what I do, who just open themselves up and say, yeah, come on, stop by. Right? I mean, I can't invite you over to my house, but I can open up a Zoom room and we can talk, we can chat. And, people have said, I can't.
Super gracious, man. JB@jeffbajorek.com. Coming to us live from the city, Detroit. Jeff, you're the best, man. Thanks, dude. This was great. I really appreciate you. My pleasure.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks.
So
man.
yeah. So folks, so this is it. We're wrapped up. We're ending